Hi, I'm Dr. Kath at Clinic Alchemy, and today we're going to be talking about 7 common GDPR mistakes that doctors make. The GDPR, not exactly a sexy topic, is it? But let's face it, if you don't get it right, you could end up in some serious hot water. I know this because people contact us on a weekly basis with some kind of GDPR crisis that normally relates to them not being prepped well. I don't want that to happen to you. So here are the 7 mistakes that people frequently make. Maybe one of them does apply to you. Number 1, not being registered with the ICO. As doctors, we handle patient data. We do things with it, we process it, we kind of store it around. And that means we have to be registered with the Information Commissioner's Office. If you've not done this already, it's actually a really simple process and it'll cost you about 40 quid. So go online and do it today. Number 2, dumping all the GDPR stuff on your poor secretary. Here's the thing. You're the data controller, not your secretary. So when the poop hits the fan, it's you that's going to be in trouble, not them. If you get stuck in and do the GDPR work, you'll really understand it so much better, and that way it will enable you to stay compliant. Mistake number 3, thinking that a privacy notice and a bit of email encryption is going to tick all the boxes. There's way more to the GDPR than simply having a privacy notice on your website and using egress. I regularly see doctors trying to hash together some kind of privacy notice from some generic stuff they've seen online. The problem is you can't actually construct a privacy notice unless you've done something that's called a data flow audit. What the heck's that, you might be thinking? Well, it's a bit like a sort of granular list of how you use data and how you store data. And it's really important that you've done this, because if you cock up and a patient's data is breached, the ICO are going to want to see that you've got some good systems and processes in place, and a data flow audit will enable you to demonstrate that you were doing your very best, honest governor, and it wasn't just down to the fact that you were being a bit lapsadaisical. So getting a proper data flow audit and a properly constructed privacy notice is really important, but there's more to it than just that. Number 4, using consent as your lawful basis for processing data. So under the GDPR, we have to have a reason to be handling and storing data. And what you have to understand is that there's a very big difference between the concept of consent in the clinical setting and consent in the GDPR setting. So don't confuse the two. In the clinical setting, obviously there are going to be occasions when you might be carrying out a procedure, doing some surgery, blah, 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 and you're going to need to get the patient to sign a consent form, and you take them through that consent process. The mistake that some clinicians make is that they use consent, i.e. a glorious form, I consent to you storing my data, doing X, Y, and Z, as their lawful basis. That's a problem because patients, in theory then, can withdraw consent. And if you think about it, they may say to you, I want you to get rid of all of my clinical records. And that's bad news, isn't it? Because as doctors, we're obliged to keep clinical records. And when it comes to sort of medical legal issues, if you ain't got the records to back you up, you're in the poop. A far better reason is to use the legal obligation as your reason for processing data. We can also include some verbiage about our regulatory bodies. So for example, the 2008 Health and Social Care Act obliges us as clinicians to keep contemporaneous, accurate records of our patients, and the GMC does as well. And that's a much better lawful basis for processing data. Number 5, not having data processor to data controller agreements in place. What the heck's that, you might be thinking? Well, as clinicians, we're data controllers. But any time we then use other external services to handle our patient data, so for example, that could be a medical transcription company or a company that provides email services, they are data processors. And you have to have a written agreement in place to say that they're taking care of patients' data in a legit GDPR manner, and we've got a written agreement that backs that up. Number 6, not encrypting your hardware. That seems really obvious, doesn't it? But you'd be amazed the number of people who have a Windows laptop or a MacBook or even a little dictation device that's not encrypted. How many times have you gone into a hospital and found someone's USB stick with some MRI pictures sticking out the bottom of the hospital PC? I find that fairly regularly. That's bad news because it means that data can be lost. So make sure your hardware is encrypted, and don't forget to check out those little external drives that you might be using to back up your systems with as well. And number 7, using free or personal cloud services to handle your patient data. What might that mean? Well, typically it means something like using personal Gmail or Dropbox, which is frankly a really, really bad idea. Why is it a bad idea? Well, they're free for a reason. And one of the key reasons that's going to impact on you is that you can't then have a data processor to controller agreement in place if you're using free services. It's far better to use a GDPR legit service such as Office 365, OneDrive for Business that dovetails with stuff like egress. Then you can get those all-important data processors to controller agreements in place. Plus it makes you look legit. There's nothing more tatty than having a drsmith@gmail.com email address. It just doesn't look professional. So those are my 7 common GDPR pitfalls. Make sure you avoid them. If you've enjoyed today's video, don't forget to subscribe, share it with your friends and colleagues, and we'd love to hear from you. So put your comments in the box below.